would be aimed at general welfare of the labor classes and for the other members of the society. But when we look at the second experiment that Ambedkar does in the form of depressed class, what he calls as federation, right? So that the scheduled caste federation actually, he tries to come to some form of alliance with the socialist parties, and that remains a kind of non-starter for Ambedkar, because politically it would not be very successful as far as Ambedkar's this experiment in the form of the federation would be concerned, right? But eventually, towards the 1956, right? When, and that's the year, that's the year Ambedkar would pass away, and that is the year where Ambedkar would organize a large conference of Mahars, wherein he would declare that he would be embracing Buddhism. That is something which happens in 1956, and the issue that I would come to, and that's where we will try to understand his approach towards religion and his approach towards culture. The point which someone had raised in the previous discussion, right? So it is at that point of time that in 1956 that Ambedkar would establish the Republican Party, and the overall objective again would be to work something for the scheduled caste. So it was seen that by that time the Britishers had already created a list of castes which would be part of the scheduled caste, and Ambedkar would emerge as a figure who would be seen to be primarily working towards reformation for the members of this caste. So, as far as the later two political experiments were concerned, so certainly we will see that, especially by the time Ambedkar establishes the Republican Party, his approach would be that the party should work more for the depressed classes, right? Party should work more for the depressed classes rather than for the members of the scheduled caste alone. So that's where, for the depressed classes, say again, members of the scheduled tribe, the members of the labor. So that's what again the party would be more of a nature which would aim at working for the general welfare, and especially targeted towards the depressed class, right? So that is something which happens.
So what is difference between scheduled caste and depressed class?
Okay, that's what scheduled castes probably as you would be aware, there is this list of class which were made part of the schedule by the Britishers, and which we have continued, and revisions have taken place, and castes have been included part of that. So that's what is scheduled caste. But when we refer to depressed classes, so first thing we have to understand that as far as Ambedkar was concerned, Ambedkar had used this term primarily to refer to the members of the lower castes in India, and primarily the members of the caste who would be treated as untouchables, right? But generally, depressed classes would mean that irrespective of the caste identity, right? Irrespective of the caste identity, everyone who is disadvantaged in some form or the other, who is at the margins of the society, that may be considered or that may be taken to be a member of the depressed classes, right? So this is again, a kind of difference that we can understand between the class identity and caste identity, right? Say for instance, economically backward classes. So economically backward classes, when we refer to it as a class, then any member of the society which is economically backward can be member of the class. But when we refer to caste, then we come to a specific caste identity, right? So that's what the difference is. Okay. But as I told you earlier, for Ambedkar, this would be term which would be used primarily to refer to the members of the untouchables. See, that is where that is where he would be at difference. That is okay. That is where again he would be at difference with with Gandhi. So for Gandhi would use the term Harijan, right? Harijan, so that's where Ambedkar would not agree to use of this term. Okay, is that clear? Okay, so
Yes, sir.
okay, right. So that is लेकिन यहाँ पे जो एक चीज हम ऐड कर सकते हैं, then why Ambedkar's decision to declare that he no more would remain part of the Hindu fold comes as late as 1956, because first time he had expressed this intention somewhere in 1936, right? Somewhere in 1935-36. But if you see, it is at that point of time that the whole political process starts, and the guaranteed representation in legislative bodies, especially for the members of the scheduled castes, would depend upon the fact that they would remain part of the Hindu fold. So it was primarily a pragmatic and political consideration that many have understood made Ambedkar to wait till 1956, when just 2 months before his death, somewhere in October, he calls a large conference of his community, Mahars, and therein he declares that he would be converting to Buddhism. Now, there are two things, right? Ambedkar definitely had belief or faith in religion. He did not renounce religion. So he was not an atheist, and he was not a person whom possibly we can call as irreligious, right? Number one. Number two, the point I had made earlier that he primarily would be critical of Hinduism on two accounts. Number one, due to the inherent inequality, especially which would be rooted in the caste system. That is one. And second, especially the way he would criticize the role of the priestly class in Hinduism. So again, this is the point I would refer to while I would discuss that how Ambedkar would take an approach of reformation, right? That's something I would come to. But at the same time, we also have to keep in mind that at different points, and especially in the Constituent Assembly, when he was declaring that India appeared divided, and he of course would also admit that he also possibly represented one of the factions, but he would very much emphasize the underlying cultural unity. So his understanding was that once the discriminations and once the inequalities they are overcome, then there is something what one can find as one unified India. But despite the fact that there may be certain differences, there may be inequalities, Ambedkar would still expect that there has to have some form of cultural unity in India. So cultural unity is something which nowhere Ambedkar would deny, and this is again linked to his understanding of the caste system in India. And that is what that's what leads me to the next aspect, that how Ambedkar has dealt with his whole understanding of caste, and the way he would understand that reformations may happen, and how Indian society can move towards achieving the ideal of equality. So first thing, what Ambedkar says that he is trying to uh, present some sociological explanation of the caste system in India. Uh, there are writings of Ambedkar which one can refer to. A caste in India, its mechanism, genesis, and development. That is one. Second is untouchables. Who were they and why they become untouchables? Then annihilation of caste. Right. So these are primarily the three works possibly one can refer to when one is trying to understand his understanding of caste. Now, he understood that as far as the whole caste system was concerned, it was not always part of the Indian society. Meaning that there might have been some form of stratification, but it was more of a class kind rather than caste kind. And how did then caste came into existence? So for that, Ambedkar would claim that it was primarily due to the fact that the priestly class, right, it made itself a closed group, and other groups were closed out. So once this happens, then other groups too would follow the suit, and they would also make themselves a closed group, which would be endogamous in nature and interdining and other form of interactions. They would become limited. So that is how, in his understanding, jati, caste, it came into existence. In fact, that was the paper he had presented in Colombia on the caste system in India. And this is how he had tried to explain the emergence of the caste system. But at the same time, the point I made earlier, he would emphasize that it is not that there is no unity. So he would still emphasize that there is one underlying cultural unity, right? So that's how one would look at as far as his whole view on religion is concerned, or his whole approach to culture is concerned. Right? So the point he was trying to emphasize time and again, that it was primarily due to the discriminations, it was primarily due to the exploitation linked to the caste system, that Hinduism would possibly not a religion with which he would die. So that is where the point one can understand that before 2 months of his death, he converts himself to Buddhism. And his choice of Buddhism was based on the fact that Buddhism would emphasize on moral values rather than the fact that how God would be achieved, how God can be achieved. So moral values is something which would be more important in Buddhism, apart from the fact that one can understand that Buddhism is a religion which had its origin in India, right? He also understood that if you look at India's neighbors, then most of the countries they were following Buddhism. So of course, I think Ambedkar would be referring to the countries in Southeast Asia and East Asia, right? So that is one.